And welcome, Go Blue, to another instant reaction here on the Michigan Podcast Channel. I'm Steve Deace with Noah Deace, not here because of nepotism, but only his takes. And Michigan with a 63-3 win over Central Michigan. I'm not sure how many people saw this one coming. An incredible stat line. Michigan had 8 rushing touchdowns scored by 6 different players. First time since the Bowling Green game. Remember, that was the night that it was either a touchdown or J.J. McCarthy interception. First time since then, in 2023, that Michigan has not punted in a game. And you got to go back a decade to the era of Devin Gardner and Denard Robinson. First time a quarterback has had 200 yards passing and 100 yards rushing in the game. Just a dominant performance by the Wolverines, emptied out the benches. But to me, Noah, I think we have to start with Bryce Underwood because I think the reason nobody saw this coming, Michigan's injury report included 14 guys that didn't play in this game. All right, several of them starters, several of them regulars in the 2 deep. As you would expect, beat up out of the Oklahoma game, pretty much rested everybody with Nebraska next week. So we saw a lot of guys like Elijah Dotson, Bryce Underwood's teammate, getting his first action. He got an interception as well. But I think the reason, given how beat up Michigan was, the spot in the schedule, nobody saw this coming, is because this was a dramatically different offense than what Michigan ran a week ago. It's a dramatically different offense than what you saw Michigan run for many years under Jim Harbaugh. Essentially, after taking that L last week, Sharon Moore and the coaches got together and said, you know what, man, we got to give the kid the keys to the car. And they did. And he turned out to be a Ferrari. And Bryce Underwood was simply sensational, Noah. And it's only fitting his final play was a Cam Newton-like, scramble from one end of the field to the other for a touchdown. And that was kind of his curtain call because it was his day. He was not perfect, but he was dynamite.
First of all, I just want to say, I don't know if you caught this, 63-3 was the score for the first Michigan game we went to together.
That's right, Hawaii.
That was the Hawaii game in 2016.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
So we did a little halftime report there, kind of similar to what we're doing now.
Right.
This is just a little bit higher quality. But yeah, that's just going to give me a little
You're a little taller too.
Yeah, a little bit. Just by a little bit.
So what were your big takeaways from the game? What stood out to you?
I can't tell if it's Sharon or not, but it looked like they were a lot more ready to run Bryce than they were in previous weeks. And I think you saw the result of that. Like, I know I texted you. I feel like if it was Sharon coaching, by the end of the first half, it would have been either like somewhere between 14-7 or 24-7. I think after that first big throw that Bryce almost threw an interception on, I don't think they would have taken any more deep shots after that. I think they would have kept trying to run it. But, I'm just surprised. I wasn't expecting them to throw it as much as they did and to throw as many deep throws as they did. I was hoping towards that, but I wasn't expecting that. And I think it really felt like for the first time all season that Chip Lindsey was actually calling the plays. And I think you saw that because we scored 63 points. I think we could have easily put up 42 or more against New Mexico. I think it was an inability to even try. I think that was a little bit more forgivable because you're trying not to show Oklahoma any looks. Mm-hmm. But then again, you didn't give Oklahoma any looks in the first place, so why didn't you just throw it out there then?
We did such a good job of hiding our offense from Oklahoma that after we left Norman, they still don't know what it is.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, where was this last week? I'm not going to confidently say, if we would have thrown it more, we would have won last week, because you have no way of knowing that.
Right.
It's college football. You never know. So I'm not going to say that because that's over and done with. I don't even care about that much anymore. But, I just was really surprised by just the readiness they had to throw the ball and to throw Bryce out there and let him be what he's there to be. He's more Cam Newton today than he has been the past few weeks, and that's what I expected him to be this season. And I think, like I know you pointed out, in the Ravens-Bills game, but they both have multi-million-dollar MVP caliber quarterbacks, pretty backups, but they're just letting them run it out there. They're letting them be playmakers. You know what I'm saying? I know Sharon says if you want to run the quarterback, you need to have a backup. Looks like they didn't need to back up very much today. I know like today was the first day you saw Jaden Davis out there. He didn't throw the ball once, so I'm not sure how they feel about him. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Jaden Davis doesn't throw a ball all season, to be honest, depending on Mikey Keene's status and when he gets back. If there's a situation where we need a backup, right. I feel like if Mikey Keene comes back, he'd beat that guy.
So you're wearing your DMC shirt. You have played football more recently than me. So I think you're more qualified to answer this question than I am, because it's been a minute since I've been out there and been hit and been tackled. But I actually, this is where I disagree about the running your quarterback and his health thing. because I actually think at 6'4", 230 pounds, Bryce is safer actually running the football, where he is the one delivering the blow, than he is sitting back there in the pocket behind. We were down 2 offensive line starters today. That's 2 of the 14 guys that we had held out for injuries. So we're a major reshuffling there. There were guys in as backups that were backups to the backups that probably a lot of fans don't even know who a Ben Roebuck is, for example, and he was playing in the third quarter. See, to me, behind a patchwork offensive line, he's not Denard Robinson, who was like 5'10", 5'11", and 195 pounds. He's 6'4", 230 pounds. I actually think that Bryce Underwood might be safer running the football, where he's the one delivering the blow, rather than sitting back there in a vulnerable state scanning the field behind a patchwork offensive line where guys can roll up on him more easily. He can get blindsided more easily. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it'll be a little bit different when you're going against like Sonny Styles in Ohio State compared to a Central Michigan linebacker.
True.
But still, at the same time, I think that's a valid point. And to your point, I know you said I've played football more recently. Play was a very strong word to use for my experience playing high school football. I didn't really see the field very much. I'm much more useful sitting here talking about it than playing, but that is true, though. And I mean, I don't know what to say other than that. I mean, Bryce just looked like he was a completely different player than the past 2 weeks, because it looked like they were running a completely different offense in the past 2 weeks.
They were.
I think a big part of that is it looked like Chip was given full-on play calling capabilities than he has been the past 2 weeks.
What do you think of Biff Poggi, who was the acting head coach today, saying in the postgame that he thought Bryce was Batman? When asked to assess his performance today, he said, I don't know. Maybe he is him. Maybe he is Batman. What'd you think of that?
I mean, he looked as inexperienced in post-game interviews as I am right now, I would say. He looked like he kind of didn't know what to say, so he just threw something out there. I think it's funny, but it didn't really seem like he knew what to say there.
I mean, you look at some of these stats, they look like you played NCAA football on an easy level. I mean, Michigan had almost 600 yards of offense more than Central Michigan had, well over 500 more yards. How about this stat line? 35 first downs to 8 for Central Michigan. That number, that's not even dominance. That's like obscene. And I really thought a message was being sent by the coaches all the way through the end. At the beginning, the tone was set by the coaches just handing Bryce the keys to the car. I mean, that very first drive when they went down the field was not like a methodical Michigan run and like a big play action pass here or there. They came right up from the beginning and said, the first scripted series, we're running this offense through Bryce Underwood. And that kind of set the tone. And then I thought defensively, I mean, even the final real possession for Central Michigan, there's a bunch of guys out there that names probably you and I don't even know. And Wink is still out here calling zone blitzes, fire zones. And I think after what happened last week against Oklahoma, where we kind of got emasculated a little bit, like you and I talked about after the game, I think you can see that this team was coached aggressively during the week. They were given an aggressive game plan. And I think that they wanted to send a message, whether it was the third string in there or the first string in there. We have an expectation for the amount of recklessly physical, or I should say relentlessly physical football that Michigan is known for. And we're going to get back to that, and we're going to be aggressive, and we're not just going to pound it out. And I hope this was a tone setter, Noah, as we head into the Big Ten now.
I just think Bryce looks ready to lead the offense in a completely different way than J.J. McCarthy did. Obviously, I don't hate J.J. McCarthy. I'm a big J.J. McCarthy guy. I just think it didn't really feel until like his junior year that he was really in control of the offense and he was the star there. And even then, it was kind of the Blake Corum and then the offensive line kind of show, and he was also there. Now it kind of feels like Bryce Underwood's the show as a true freshman. And something also that's crazy is I'm sitting there watching him like, this guy's 6 months younger than I am, and he's this good now. Imagine how good he's going to be in 26 or 27, especially if they can get like a true X factor wide receiver for him in the portal, which I'd like to see.
So as we look ahead now, the Big Ten opener next week at Nebraska. Sharon was able to coach the team until 11:59 p.m. on Friday night. And word is from one of Michigan's top beat writers, Chris Ballas, over at the Wolverine, that essentially Michigan did 2 weeks of prep for this game. That much of what you saw out there today, which would explain probably the aggressive game planning, how much Bryce was still playing. If Jimmy was here, Bryce probably doesn't come out for the second and start in the second half. But without Sharon next week, I think what they were showing Nebraska is this is what we're going to present on film. you have to defend the entire field. We're never going back to whatever that shell of ourselves we performed as against Oklahoma. So throw that film out. And it sounds as if Michigan basically, prepared for Nebraska this week, along with Central Michigan, because now Sharon won't be there for the game prep heading into next week. So, you have any thoughts about that?
I'd like to see Andrew Marsh get in a bit more. I think his touchdown play today felt very reminiscent of some.
He also was given one of the worst holding calls I've literally ever seen.
100%.
And that's the thing about this game. Michigan had 2 holding calls. One was legit. The one on on a phobia on Haynes' touch. It still wasn't egregious, but it was by the rule a hold. The one called on Andrew Marshall, Andrew Marsh, otherwise Jordan Marshall would have had an even bigger day because he had a big touchdown run there. That was one of the worst holding calls I've ever seen. Anyway, back to you talking about Marsh. Go ahead.
I would just like to see him get in more. I think he would have had a touchdown in that New Mexico game if he turned his head around. I think that ended around there felt very reminiscent of Samaj Morgan in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
I think as a true freshman, he's a lot more talented than Samaj Morgan was in 2023. So I'd like to see him play in the same kind of role that Samaj did then, but even more. Just because I don't think the wide receiver room has a guy like as good as Roman Wilson. I think Donovan McCulley, you can't really compare them because they're completely different styles of receiver that they might as well be a different position. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But I think Jordan Marshall looks a lot better today. I was feeling a little nervous about him after these past 2 games, but I think he looked just as good as Justice Haynes today. Honestly, especially after that breakout run that should have not been called back. But I've seen, and I don't know if this is something I might have just missed in prior years. It feels like we get a lot of holding calls missed that are done to us. But it feels like these past 3 weeks even, there's been a lot of kind of dummy calls that are called on us at certain moments where it feels like almost like this is the hammer. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's kind of how it feels to me, where it feels like there's maybe sort of vendetta there. What do you think about that?
I don't think it's outside the norm whatsoever. Officials are human like anybody else. So I don't think that's crazy or conspiratorial whatsoever. If you look at last year, for example, Ohio State had a way more egregious, it was still a bad call, but a way more egregious targeting than what Jay Sean got 2 weeks ago, and they got that one overturned. And even with Big Ten league support, we couldn't get ours overturned. So there could be a little vigilante justice, I guess, if that's what you're kind of saying. Some people deciding they're going to maybe draw some blood on their own because Michigan they think didn't get punished enough. Let's talk about any concerns we have coming out of this game, and it's tough when you win by 60 to have any concerns. All right, I still don't see when we do play coverage on 3rd and long. I still don't see the kind of push from the front 4 that I expected to see, based on the amount of height that this unit was given going into the year. One of the things that we should talk about that we didn't is they made one adjustment today, and that's what they put Jay Sean Barham at edge. And boy, howdy, he was unblockable when he was in the game. Absolutely unblockable. Central Michigan had no answer for that level of explosion. But after him, name me another guy on the defensive front on the first string that kind of flashed for you. In a 60-point win, you would kind of think you were in the opposing team's backfield, you're the defensive front, erasing the line of scrimmage all day. They weren't terrible either. I'm not impressed. They're not terrible. It's just not yet what I expected it to be. Fair or unfair?
I think it's pretty fair. Another concern I have is the special teams.
You talk about Zavada 2 weeks in a row with the miss.
Zavada 2 weeks in a row, which that could just be he happened to miss 2 weeks in a row, and he stole Dominic Zavada. That may be that the miss last week kind of got to his head because that feels like what sort of happened to Jake Moody in the NFL. It's kind of more of a confidence thing with kickers and less of a physical thing because they're playing a completely different sport than everyone else. So it's completely different. It's more like golf to me, in my opinion. But I'm a little bit concerned, especially on the punt return unit. There's 2 times today where the blockers ran into Samaj Morgan. Yeah. And even then, Samaj Morgan was able to field both of those, but I don't know how good I feel about his ability to field punts. There was that one earlier this season, and then the one in 2023. Maybe
he makes you nervous.
He just happens to miss 2, and that's it. Yeah. But it just makes me a little bit nervous. And just overall, there hasn't really been any big returns from any of the other teams we've played. But there hasn't really been any big returns from us, and I'd like to see that, especially with a young quarterback. Even one as good as Bryce Underwood, I'd like to see the return unit be able to get him some better field position and to be a little bit more of a threat, and then don't run into the returner.
I think that's very good analysis. That's a coaching issue. When you have multiple situations where a returner, and it's a different guy both times, is running in, on the return team, running into your punt return guy. I mean, that's just a coaching issue. Guys just not lined up right, not knowing where they're at, not being self-aware. So, and those are the kinds of things when you go on the road. And Michigan will next week, 2:30 p.m. Or 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 where you and I live, 3:30 Eastern at Nebraska. Same part of the season, late September, same window, kickoff window, that 3:30 Eastern. They went to Nebraska 2 years ago and absolutely named the score against the Huskers. And so Matt Rule, he's run a lot of smack about Connor Stallions and that whole thing the last couple of years, and cried and whined, but we lost by 50 because they had our signals and everything else. They have this game circled. This is a program that has been yearning Nebraska for national relevancy. Yet again, they can get it by beating a nationally ranked Michigan, particularly coming off a 60-point win. So the two things that you and I addressed are the kinds of things that could cost you in that game next week, which you said about special teams miscues, where you just now you give them an extra possession in what's maybe going to be a one-score game either way, and that you don't want to do that with the kind of miscues you talked about. And then in my case with Dylan Raiola, he is mobile. He's not John Mateer mobile. He is not, hey, that guy can run for 800 yards in a season like John Mateer did last year. But he is a guy that on 3rd, 4, 3rd and 6 can make you pay over and over again with his legs. And that is the kind of thing that if your defensive front cannot reset the line of scrimmage, all right, he can make you pay for that. So those are a couple things that we're going to have to improve heading into next week. That's all I have. You got anything else you wanted to say?
That covers it.
All right, that'll do it for this week's Instant Reaction. Again, not much to say when you win by 60 points other than good job, everybody. All right, we'll see you next week. Go Blue.